I don't want to be mean. That is the sentence that destroys lives. It is a quiet sentence, usually whispered in a therapist's office, often accompanied by tears of exhaustion. I want to tell you about a woman I worked with named Elena. Elena was 62 years old, elegant, soft-spoken, and completely hollowed out. She sat on my couch, twisting a tissue in her hands, and said, "I know my son is taking advantage of me. I know my husband takes me for granted. I know my friends only call when they need something. But if I stop giving, if I stop saying yes, who am I? And worse, if I say no, I will disappoint them. And if I disappoint them, I lose them." Elena believed, like so many women in their 50s, 60s, and beyond, that her value on this earth was directly tied to her ability to never let anyone down. She believed that disappointment was a sin. But today, I am going to tell you something that contradicts almost everything you were raised to believe. I'm going to tell you why disappointing people is not a failure. It is a survival strategy. It is the only way to save your health, your sanity, and your future. The inability to disappoint others is actually a hidden psychological trap that leads to what we call compassion fatigue and total identity collapse. I'm a clinical psychologist with years of experience specializing in female psychology and relationship dynamics, particularly in the second half of life. In my practice, I have seen thousands of intelligent, compassionate women who are slowly drowning because they cannot bear the discomfort of someone else's displeasure. They have been conditioned to be the shock absorbers of their families, the emotional caretakers of their communities, and the eternal fixers of broken things. But here is the dangerous truth. If you never disappoint anyone, you are constantly disappointing yourself. And at your stage of life, the cost of that self-betrayal becomes incredibly high. We are talking about your physical health, your financial security, and your emotional legacy. Before we go deeper into the specific traps and exactly how to break them, I want to ask you to take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. This isn't just about growing an audience, it is about creating a community of women who are ready to reclaim their autonomy. By subscribing, you are signaling to yourself that your education and your mental well-being are priorities. And please stay with me until the very end of this video. In the final few minutes, I am going to give you a set of specific self-diagnostic questions, a litmus test, that will reveal instantly if you are currently caught in the dangerous cycle of pathological pleasing. These questions can change the way you see your relationships forever, so do not miss them. Now, let's look at the first major danger, the first area where you must learn to become comfortable with disappointment. We call this the trap of the eternal mother. This is specific to women who have adult children. There is a biological and psychological drive in women to nurture, to protect, and to provide. When your children were small, your job was to shield them from pain. But now that they are in their 20s, 30s, or 40s, that same instinct has mutated into something harmful. I worked with a woman named Sarah, a 65-year-old retired nurse. She had a savings account she had built over 40 years of hard work. She also had a 36-year-old daughter who was figuring things out. The daughter was constantly in minor crises, car repairs, rent shortages, emotional breakups. Every time the daughter called, Sarah felt that old tug at her heartstrings, that cortisol spike that said, "My baby is in trouble." Sarah would write the check. She would cancel her own plans to babysit. She would absorb the chaos. Sarah told me, "I can't say no. She'll be so disappointed. She'll feel abandoned." The psychological reality here is that Sarah wasn't helping, she was enabling. But more importantly, she was destroying her own security. Sarah was dipping into funds meant for her own long-term care. She was losing sleep. Her blood pressure was dangerously high. The danger here is confusing love with shielding adults from consequences. When you protect an adult from the consequences of their choices, you are robbing them of their competence, and you are robbing yourself of your peace. You must be willing to disappoint your adult children to save them and to save yourself. When you say no, they will be angry. They will be disappointed. They may even accuse you of not caring. That is the manipulation of the dependent. You have to be strong enough to let them feel that disappointment, because that disappointment is the catalyst for their growth. Here is the concrete rule. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, even if those people are your children. The second danger is even more subtle and pervasive, often found in long-term marriages or partnerships. I call this the silent contract of tolerable unhappiness. Many women of your generation were raised with the idea that a good wife keeps the peace. You smooth over the rough edges. You anticipate needs. You manage the emotional climate of the home. But as you enter your 60s and 70s, the energy required to maintain this facade begins to run out. Consider the case of Margaret. Margaret and her husband had been married for 40 years. He was a decent man, but he was emotionally absent and extremely rigid in his routine. Since he retired, he was home all the time, criticizing how she loaded the dishwasher, demanding lunch at noon sharp, and refusing to engage in any deep conversation. Margaret felt like she was suffocating in her own home. She wanted to travel, he wanted to stay home, she wanted to take an art class, he wanted her to be available to make dinner. For years, she suppressed her desires because she didn't want to cause a fuss or disappoint him. She didn't want to be the nagging wife. The psychology here is rooted in the fear of conflict and the fear of abandonment. We convince ourselves that asserting our needs is an act of aggression, but the consequence of this silence is a deep festering resentment that often manifests as physical illness, chronic pain, autoimmune issues, or severe depression. Margaret's body was keeping the score. She was getting sick because her soul was screaming no while her mouth was saying okay. To save herself, Margaret had to learn to disappoint her husband. She had to learn to say, I am going to Italy with my sister for 2 weeks. You will have to manage your own meals. She had to learn to say, I am not cooking tonight. When she finally did this, yes, he was disappointed. He was grumpy. He was confused. But the sky did not fall. In fact, the dynamic of the relationship shifted. He had to learn to function independently, and she regained her sense of self. If you are in a relationship where your partner's happiness is entirely dependent on your subservience, that is not a partnership, it is a hostage situation. You must be willing to break the silent contract. Here is the concrete rule. Your resentment is a warning signal, not a character flaw. It is telling you that a boundary has been crossed and must be reinstated. There is a third danger that we rarely speak about, but it is rampant among women over 50. This is the trap of social politeness and the predator. This sounds extreme, but listen closely. Women are socialized to be polite, to be nice, to not make a scene. We are taught that being rude is the worst possible social crime. Predators, whether they are financial scammers, romance scammers, or just manipulative people entering your life, bank on this training. They count on the fact that you will not want to disappoint them or embarrass them. I have seen this happen with widows re-entering the dating world. A woman named Joan met a man online. He was charming, attentive, and seemingly perfect. Very quickly, he started pushing boundaries. He wanted to move in. He wanted to know about her finances. He wanted her to cut off certain friends who were jealous. Joan felt a pit in her stomach. Her intuition was screaming danger, but she had been raised to be a lady. She didn't want to hurt his feelings. She didn't want to seem suspicious or cynical. She worried, if I say no, he'll be so disappointed, and maybe I'll ruin a chance at love. So she stayed quiet. She suppressed her intuition to avoid disappointing a stranger. By the time she came to see me, she had lost a significant amount of money and her self-esteem was shattered. This is where the psychology of niceness becomes a survival risk. You must understand that your intuition is an ancient survival mechanism. It is millions of years of evolution designed to keep you safe. When you prioritize politeness over your gut instinct, you are dismantling your own security system. You must be willing to be seen as cold, bitchy, or suspicious if it means protecting your assets and your heart. You must be willing to disappoint a man's expectations of immediate intimacy or financial trust. Here is the concrete rule. Politeness is a social lubricant, not a safety strategy. Never trade your safety or security to spare someone else's feelings. The fourth danger is one that affects your very identity. It is the trap of the human doing. For decades, many women have built their self-worth on being useful. You were the supermom, the career woman, the volunteer, the organizer. You were the one everyone could count on. Now, as you age, perhaps your energy levels are changing. Perhaps you are retiring. But the demand for your labor hasn't stopped. In fact, people may expect even more of you now that you have so much free time. I recall a patient, Brenda, who was the chairperson of 3 different charity boards and the primary babysitter for her 5 grandchildren. She was 68. She was exhausted. She had heart palpitations. She told me, "I want to quit the boards. I want to tell my kids I can only babysit once a week, not every day. But they rely on me. If I step down, I'll be letting the community down. I'll be letting my kids down." Brenda was trapped in the belief that she only mattered if she was producing results for others. She was terrified that if she stopped doing, she would stop being. She feared that if she disappointed people by saying, "I can't do that anymore," they would stop loving her. The danger here is burnout and a total loss of the joy of living. You become a resource to be mined rather than a person to be cherished. The psychological shift required here is moving from transactional worth to intrinsic worth. You are valuable because you exist, not because of what you do for others. You must disappoint the people who view you as an endless resource. When you start saying no, you will find out who loves you for you and who loves you for what you do for them. It is a painful but necessary filtering process. Here is the concrete rule. You are a human being, not a human doing. Your rest and your leisure are not rewards you have to earn. They are biological rights. Let's escalate this to look at the broader risks. What happens if you don't learn this lesson? What happens if you continue to avoid disappointing people? It is not just about being tired. It is about your physiological survival. We know from clinical research that chronic repression of emotion and needs is linked to higher rates of autoimmune disease, cardiovascular issues, and even cognitive decline. When you suppress your no, you flood your body with stress hormones like cortisol. You live in a state of low-grade fight or flight. Furthermore, consider the emotional legacy you are leaving. If you have daughters or granddaughters, they are watching you. If they see you running yourself, ragged, apologizing for existing, and never setting a boundary, they learn that this is what it means to be a woman. They learn that love equals martyrdom. By failing to save yourself, you are inadvertently teaching the next generation to sacrifice themselves too. Disappointing people is actually a form of leadership. It models self-respect for the younger women in your life. So, what are the healthy alternatives? How do we actually do this? I am not suggesting you become a hermit or a narcissist. I am suggesting a model of compassionate detachment. This means you can love someone deeply without taking responsibility for their emotions. You can listen to your friends' problems without trying to fix them. You can love your adult children without funding their lifestyle. One practical solution is what I call the pause. When someone asks you for something, whether it is a favor, money, or your time, never answer immediately. The old habit is to say yes before you've even thought about it. Your new practice is to say, let me check my schedule and get back to you, or I need to think about that. This buys you time to check in with your own body. Does the request make you feel heavy and tired, or light and excited? If it feels heavy, the answer must be no. And when you deliver that no, you do not need to offer a 5-minute explanation or excuse. I can't do that right now is a complete sentence. You might be thinking, but this feels so selfish. Let me reframe that for you. Selfishness is demanding that others live their lives to please you. Self-care is demanding that you live your life to please yourself. There is a massive difference. You are entering the autumn and winter of your life. This time is precious. It is finite. You do not have infinite decades left to waste on guilt. You have earned the right to curate your life. Now, I want to address your identity and your self-worth directly. Many of you feel that if you stop pleasing, you will be alone. That is the ultimate fear, the fear of the lonely older woman. But in my experience, the opposite is true. The women who set boundaries, who possess a strong sense of self, and who refuse to be doormats, are the ones who attract the highest quality relationships. They attract friends who respect them. They attract partners who value them. When you stop trying to buy love with obedience, you make room for real love. Love that is based on mutual respect, not servitude. I promised you at the beginning of this video that I would provide a set of self-diagnostic questions to help you determine if you are in the danger zone. I want you to close your eyes for a moment, take a deep breath, and answer these questions honestly in the privacy of your own mind. Question 1. Do you feel a wave of physical relief when a friend or family member cancels plans with you? That relief is your body telling you that you didn't want to go in the first place, but you were too afraid to say no. Question 2. Do you regularly rehearse excuses in your head before saying no to someone because you feel the truth, I don't want to, isn't a valid reason? Question 3. Are you currently keeping a secret about money, giving money to someone, or spending money to fix a problem because you know other people in your life would disapprove or worry? Secrecy is a major red flag of an enabling dynamic. Question 4. Do you feel responsible for the moods of the people in your house? If your husband is grumpy or your daughter is sad, do you feel like you failed or like it is your job to fix it immediately? Question 5. When was the last time you did something purely for yourself that inconvenienced someone else and you didn't apologize for it? If you can't remember, you are in the trap. Question 6. Do you worry that if you stop being useful, if you stop cooking, driving, babysitting, paying, that the people you love will stop visiting? If you answered yes to even 2 of these questions, you are currently prioritizing other people's comfort over your own survival. You are avoiding disappointment at the cost of your soul. I want to leave you with this final thought. Disappointing people is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of clarity. It draws a line in the sand that says, this is who I am, this is what I can do, and this is what I will not do. The people who truly love you will respect that line. The people who only love what you do for them will fall away. And let them fall. Let them be disappointed, because what remains after the disappointment clears is the only thing worth having. A life that is truly, authentically yours. You have spent decades building the lives of others. It is time finally to save your own.